We're talking Giants football with special guest Laurie Fitzpatrick, a former Women's Football League player. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast, part of the LockedOn Podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Traina here with you, and as promised, I have a special interview. This is one that I've been wanting to have for a long time. The lady on the screen with me is Laurie Fitzpatrick. She is a former football player. She played for the iWFL. She was also with the WFA, Women's Football Alliance, played cornerback, played running back. She knows a lot about the game, a lot about the quarterback position, which we are going to talk about. Even though she didn't play quarterback, she's going to give us some opinions on that. We're going to talk about Brian Daboll, a whole bunch of stuff, and I am so excited. Laurie, thank you so much for coming on with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be on here. Honestly, I grew up in Jersey, so I have a lot of history, and I know a lot about the NFC East. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here to talk football.
And Laurie, of course, can also be read on USA Today's Touchdown Wire. She's a football writer on top of everything, and I believe also a podcaster too, right? You have a podcast?
Yeah, so I was talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars for a little bit. I'm a part of the Believe Network, so I've been trying to get kind of that back up and running. After the off season, and I also have a YouTube channel where I just make videos about every single player across the NFL. Sometimes just like schemes and things like that with different teams. It's not focused on one team. It's kind of all over. So yeah, it's called Ponytails Talking Pigskins. So
all right, I love it. We'll put it all in the show notes for you if you want to check it out, Giant fans. We've got a lot to cover with Laurie. And Laurie, let's start off with the change in the Giants' offensive philosophy. Now, obviously, we haven't seen how head coach Brian Daboll, how offensive coordinator Mike Kafka, how they're going to specifically map out this offense. We know, obviously, their history. Daboll coming down from Buffalo, Kafka coming over from Kansas City, taking your best guess, taking into consideration the personnel that the Giants have on offense, what do you maybe envision for this offensive scheme? How can they get it basically from life support to being fully functional?
Yeah, I think there's going to be more misdirection. I think that they're going to have some more maybe jet sweeps. They're going to run some empty looks. They're going to put, Saquon out on the outside. They may hand it off to Wandell. And it really also depends on how, Tony is doing too. I haven't really done much research on how he's feeling health wise. But if he's able to really go all out 110% this year, him and Robinson, I think they're going to be a pretty deadly duo. If you can basically just put the ball in their hands and get them in open space, I think they have a really good chance of having more yak, so yards after the catch, right? So I think it's going to be more of a spread type of offense, and I think they're going to just try to get the ball out of Daniel Jones' hands pretty quickly. It's going to be probably more timing routes. You'll see a little bit of RPO in there, and I know you guys don't want to see Daniel Jones run the ball. You're a little afraid of, what's going to happen. Is he going to slide? Is he not going to slide? You don't want him to get hurt. But if you asked me 4 months ago, if the Giants were going to be able to land 2 offensive linemen, including Clevion Thibodeau, like I would have said no way. And with Evan Neal, and now you guys have Evan Neal in there, who's obviously the best tackle. So I think Daniel Jones is going to have a little bit more confidence actually staying in the pocket this year. But it's going to be more of a timing thing. I think you're going to see maybe like short throws and then deep throws. So there's probably not going to be a lot of in between, but more spread.
Would you say it's going to be more Buffalo flavor, or what? I'm trying to kind of figure out, because Buffalo and Kansas City, two very different systems. So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out where exactly the two systems are going to mesh. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's tough, right? So you don't you don't really have a Patrick Mahomes, but who is Patrick Mahomes? He's his own player, right? And you don't know if you have a Josh Allen because he's Josh Allen. So you have to kind of take a mix between the both of them. But you certainly have the wide receivers that are similar to Tyreek Hill, where they can get open fairly quickly right off the break. But they also take handoffs in the backfield. So I think it'll be less centralized around Daniel Jones and more about the weapons that surround him, and see what they can do after the catch. I think that's going to be more important than like centralizing the offense around the quarterback. But Daniel Jones, if you look at that first season, man, like he was dangerous. So you kind of you want to see him become more comfortable first before you can trust him with the ball deep.
Yeah, definitely. Now you look at Dable and what he was able to do with Josh Allen up in Buffalo. I mean, when Josh Allen came out, there were some questions because I think he had played at a smaller program. There were some questions about, how are they going to get him to an elite level? And Dable, I guess, adjusted the system to get Josh Allen into that groove and whatnot. What are some of the things that you maybe see from Buffalo and what Dable did up there with Josh Allen that maybe can apply here with Daniel Jones, especially considering Daniel Jones the last 3 years, that guy's been beat up and just really hasn't been given much of an advantage to making it so far?
Yeah. So, I think it's tough. It's about turnovers, right? And it became more about, not allowing him to throw interceptions. So what they basically did up there in Buffalo is just, you don't make it more than what it is. You kind of just like let things happen. Like you take your shots, you still want to be aggressive, but you want to be able to create an offense around him. So it's just more timing routes. Just let him be more comfortable in the pocket, and kind of put the guys in place of where they need to be. So, 3-step drop exactly when the receiver is going to make his break, and you have to throw it. You have to. Don't allow him to think and overthink. I think it's just basically those timing routes just have to be there. And the wide receivers have to do their job. And, that's what they were able to do in Buffalo. They had Stephon Diggs, who's arguably, one of the best wide receivers in the game. So, I think that's kind of what they were missing too. Kenny Galladay came in, and he was a little injury prone. But I think he's a guy that can certainly spread your offense. So that's going to be able to help guys underneath get open. And that's, Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, guys like that. So I think it's just more about those wide receivers getting open and it being more of a timed offensive passing scheme. But it's going to be tough because I want them to also centralize a lot of the offense around Saquon, but that's not what they did in Buffalo. So that's my question about, where are they going to go with Saquon? And are they going to trust, that he's going to be able to stay healthy? They're not going to centralize the offense around him. Obviously, even Buffalo is a pass first offense. But I think he's extremely important. Like I love Saquon. I'm totally a Saquon fan. So I'm just hoping that he is able to stay healthy. And they'll centralize it to be more of a passing offense. But if Saquon can prove that he can be the guy that you can rely on, then I think they'll maybe slowly transition into giving him more and more handoffs each game.
Yeah, already from what we've seen in OTA, Saquon has been moved all over the formation. He's been split wide. He's been in the slot. They've had him go misdirections. They've had him come out of the backfield. I think one of the most underrated aspects of his game has been using him as a receiver, getting him into space, because you put him against a linebacker or a defensive back, that's a mismatch. And we have seen it in practice so many times. It's like, we don't see it in the games and fans are like, you said that this happened. I'm like, I swear it happened. I'm not the only one who saw it. So I think this offensive staff now has realized, hey, this guy can be a mismatch. And every time they have split this guy out wide or had him in the slot, he's beaten the defender. It doesn't matter who it is, he has beaten the defender. So it's like, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? Because listen, if Saquon is going to be more effective running to the outside, which, we have seen from his days back to Penn State, why not take advantage of him running those outside routes, those wheel routes and all that other good stuff? So finally,
Yeah.
it looks like we've got a coaching staff that's going to try and modernize the offense.
Yeah. No, I think that I was reading a little about some people that have been writing about some of the OTA stuff, and I saw that they were running some empty looks.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is that speeds up the offense, right? So you think, oh man, then there's no protection for Daniel Jones, like he's gonna get smacked back there. Like, no, what it does is there's no play action, it gets the ball out fast. If you look at what Buffalo did, that's what they did with Josh Allen. That they didn't need a running back there to kind of clog up the pocket or nothing. No, put him out wide, get him out of there. Like, let Daniel Jones, just like what Josh Allen did, do his thing, get the ball out quick, just so he can kind of go through, 2-step, 3-step drops, just get the ball out of your hands. And I think that's what they want to do with Daniel.
Definitely. And the other thing that they're doing a lot more of, and maybe you can explain what the benefit is from an offensive perspective, more pre-snap motion, which we didn't really see with Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator the last couple of years. What benefit does pre-snap motion give to a quarterback?
Oh, that's a great question. So I ended up writing like a whole article on this. I think it was like a year and a half ago. Well, what it does is it does two things. It exposes the defense. Unless your defensive coordinator is super smart and all the defenders are on the same page, the pre-snap motion won't expose what the defense is doing. But a lot of the time that's not the case. If a defender is following a guy across the field when that player is motioning, most likely they're in man. And so what that does is you motion one guy and you go, okay, he's in man. So if I motion this other guy out like Saquon and somebody follows him, then that linebacker is on Saquon. Like, that for a fact. So what are you going to make them do? Run a vertical, right? So it exposes the defense, and then you're able to manipulate that defense by putting certain players in certain positions. But it can also move defenses off balance. So if you motion two guys to the left side and two defenders go with them, what is the right side? It's empty. There's nothing there. So you have your quick guys like Tony and Wandell to run out there, run wheels all in that open space that motion just created. So those are the couple things that it can do. Manipulate defenses. It certainly helps the quarterback know what the hell you're going to do once you snap the ball. Tom Brady always said, Tom Brady once said that he knew where he was going to throw the ball before the snap even happened. He already knows which guy is going to get it. And there are some players that there's some quarterbacks that literally don't know that, that they drop back, they read the defenses and they think that they see something that they don't, and they throw it and you get it intercepted. Why don't these guys just listen to the GOAT, right? I'm not, I was never like a huge Tom Brady fan or anything. I don't think anybody is that group in the Northeast that isn't living in Boston, but you got to recognize the talent, right? So why don't these guys know who they're throwing to or have an idea before the ball is snapped? Pre-snap motion does that. It's basically like a leg up on the defense. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit. If that's something that they're absolutely putting in the game plan, it's great.
And that brings up another point, because one of the quote unquote complaints that I've had about Daniel Jones is the mental processing, the pre-snap and the post-snap. It's like he sees one thing pre-snap and then takes the snap, drops back, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh gosh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So do you think pre-snap is going to maybe help him speed up that mental processing aspect of his game?
Yeah, definitely. I think that him and the coaches will have to be on the same page at all times. So there are two different ways that you can pre-snap. The coach can call it or the quarterback can call it. Usually when the coach calls it, it's helping the quarterback. So eventually down the line, then the quarterback can then make those pre-snap motions or those audibles himself. And I'm sure that's where they're going with that. So the coach calls it first, and then down the line, Daniel Jones will start to see it, if it works in the beginning. So I think, yeah, they're kind of setting him up for that. And, it does have to do with a little bit of the defenses. So in the NFC East, the Eagles haven't been too bad on defense. I mean, last year they were terrible on defense. But if you look at Washington, they had a stellar defensive line. Then the Cowboys secondary was good. So it's not like the NFC East was, easy. The defenses, that they can throw some disguises out there. So it wasn't, super easy for Daniel Jones to be able to, see something, understand it, and throw it. Like it takes time to develop that skill. So I think it's just something where, his coach kind of just like put him out there to do it himself. And I think Brian Dable is just going to be able to kind of ease him into it a little bit easier, especially with his background with Josh Allen. You can't just throw somebody out there, the Wolves, like that, what they did with him,
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, if you're looking for that special gift but can't decide, or maybe you're just ready to pop the question to that special someone, BlueNile.com has you covered either way. BlueNile.com has jewelry experts on hand 24/7 via phone or chat to help you find a gift within your budget range. Or if you're feeling creative and want to do it yourself, use BlueNile.com's online tools to create the perfect one-of-a-kind diamond ring. Whatever your occasion, make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more with the code Locked On. Put your faith in Blue Nile and know that every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece today. Go to BlueNile.com and remember that promo code Locked On to get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, Catalyst Power partners with you or your trusted energy consultant to produce a power supply plan that fits your business and your market risk tolerance. They have a suite of options customizable to your business's needs, including options that bundle with or focus on renewable energy. And right now in New York, Catalyst Power is offering an on-site solar solution for your business that requires zero installation, maintenance, or material purchase costs. That's right, zero capital expense costs for you. Plus, qualified businesses could be eligible for up to 6 months of at-cost energy supply from Catalyst Power. Visit catalystpower.com/LockedOnGiants to learn more. All right, Laurie, speaking of Daniel Jones, I want to talk a little bit about the mental aspect of it, because back in, I think it was late January, John Mara, the co-owner of the Giants, made a comment that probably is the comment of the year. He said, "We've done everything possible to screw this kid up." Hooray, they finally admitted it. They didn't have an offensive line in place for him. They had to build up the receivers and the tight ends. They had no consistency in the scheme. So, you look at some of the other quarterbacks historically in the league, and I'm talking recent, the David Carrs, for example, guys who have come in with high expectations. They haven't come into good situations, and basically they got ruined because their offensive line was garbage. They didn't have receivers, whatever the case may be. Daniel's entering year 4. What is the key here? I mean, and obviously you can't get inside his head, but as a former athlete, you've built up that mental toughness. So what is it about overcoming that? You've got this adversity, everything's going against you. So if you were advising Daniel Jones, hey, look, don't get down, what would you say to him to kind of, help him get through it, if you will?
Well, I think the hardest thing for any player is having to go through 3 different coaches, or 2 different coaches, or just a coaching change in general. I think that's where they mess up more than anything. And, it's a shame, nowadays, as a quarterback coming out of college, you have to come in and start. I don't think it's fair. And then you're going to put them behind an offensive line that is weak. And then, the coaching staff in general is just the turnover rate is high. Like, guys are coming in and leaving. And it's just like, there has to be consistency. So if there's one thing I would say, is just trust your coach and build a rapport with him that you have now, so he sticks around. It'll be hard for any kid to come into a league like the NFL and expect him to have consistency when the guys above him, aka the coaches, aren't even consistent. That's the toughest thing. And so it's really just about trusting your coaches. Just trust what they tell you, do what they say. It's hard to say, like, oh, don't see ghosts out there. It's tough when you don't trust your offensive line, but there's been a little bit of a revamp in terms of the offensive line and the guys, that are in the Evan Neal's. That's a huge pickup. So I think it's just about trusting those guys, the offensive line, trusting the guys in front of you, and then more importantly, trusting the coaches. And so I think it's a little bit more this would be more to Brian, like, make sure you build that trust between you and your quarterback. That's really the key. Football is a team sport. It's not something that, this, it's not something that just one guy can do. It takes every piece of the puzzle. You miss one block and you're toast. You know what I mean? So it's about trust, and it's about watching film, and it's about, building the rapport with the guys in front of you, the offensive line, and your coaching staff.
And how much of that also is buy-in, just taking a system and saying, okay, I can make this my own.
Everything, absolutely everything. And it has to be, you have to buy into it. It's like when you look at the Jaguars last year, look what Urban Meyer did to those guys. He went out, he didn't take the plane ride home with them. He went out to a bar. You have to set examples. You have to be able to be that example and build that trust between you and your players. You have to buy into everything that they say. So I think it's super important. It's A1A, right? It's the most important thing, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, if you're buying into something, you're going to embrace it and you're going to take ownership of it, which, I long suspected that maybe that wasn't there with the Giants, with Daniel Jones, that it's like, okay, this is the system. This is what the coach is telling me to do. It's maybe not a good fit for me, but I'm going to just go out there and do the best I can. And, kind of like a lukewarm enthusiasm, if you will. And that's kind of the vibe I picked up from him when, Garrett was here, which, was, quite frankly, I was surprised, because I figured Garrett, former quarterback, maybe they would connect a little bit better, but antiquated offense. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like he connects well with his players. I don't know if it's something like where he just comes off a little smug or something like that. Like, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's his facial expression. Like, it just doesn't seem like, I don't know. I wasn't there, obviously. We're not in the room. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think Brian, he's more of a fit in this locker room. He's more of a player's coach.
Absolutely. Much more laid back. I mean, guys aren't on eggshells and whatnot. Now, when we measure, and I get this question a lot, so I want to ask you your opinion on this. When we go to measure the success of Daniel Jones, coaches often say, don't worry about the stats, worry about, the intangibles. So what should everybody be looking for to say, yes, Daniel Jones has arrived? I mean, is there a certain stat we should be looking at? Is it decision-making? Where do you think, we need to be looking to say that, yes, this guy is it, or no, this guy is not it?
It's tough, right? Because I'm always on the optimistic side. Even when things are going bad, you can always say, well, at least he took the chance. Right. Or like, if he doesn't take the chance and he holds on to it, well, at least he didn't throw the interception. There's always there's two sides of the coin, right? You're not really sure. So honestly, I think it's how you take the losses and you turn around and you win the next week. So I would say more of a whole, like more of a 4-game stretch rather than just a game by game basis. What do you do in your 4 games, like your quadrant of the season? How do you change from one quadrant to the next? Is there development? If you call one play and you see he was open, right? And then 4 games later, you make that same, or you call that same play and you actually throw it to the right guy. There has to be a little bit of progression. And I can't even say game after game. It's not game by game. It's by quadrants. So
Okay.
I would say that would be the most, if you see any, progression or signs of him, getting better or making decisions, like compared game 1 to game 7, that's where you go, okay, has he gotten worse? Okay, then we can kind of give up on him. But, it can't be like a game by game thing, because then you're just putting too much pressure, right? I think you have to be able to learn from your mistakes. So I wouldn't say just, even if the first 2 games don't go well, just give it at least until game 5 or 6 for you to kind of go step back and say, okay, now let's look at this whole thing. Has there been progression? We called the same play. Did he see it? Did he see what he did wrong? And then his reaction post game, I think says a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, he's very even keeled. I mean, he's an Eli clone when it comes to post game. But you're right, progress in a player is never linear. So it's not like you're going to get better, a little bit better each week. You're going to have your peaks and valleys. I think ideally, from what you're saying, you want to have more peaks than you do valleys.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think his valley was 2020 and 2021. So yeah, I think it's his time to shine this year. And you guys should definitely know by game, at least 6. I said 5 or 7 in the last comment. So, right around there, we should know who Daniel Jones is. But we also have to keep in mind it's still brand new head coach, it's brand new offense again. So it's going to be tough. But yeah, I think around that time we should know, what's going on in the locker room, and the media in New York. You guys know what you're doing. So I think they usually kind of get down to the nits and grits sooner rather than later. So I think if anything, you guys will definitely know, even the media will know about that time. What's happening with Daniel Jones. Is he getting better? But yeah, I think around that time, there's still some growing to do in the roster, though. You can't lie about that. So the defense definitely has to step up as well. So.
And speaking of the defense, I did want to get some of your thoughts, since, you did play defense. You played both sides of the ball, obviously, cornerback and running back. Cornerback's a position of interest to me. And that the Giants had to part ways with James Bradberry because of the salary cap. They have Aaron Robinson, who was their 3rd-round pick last year, a guy who looks like he's the favorite to win the job. I don't know how familiar you are with all the collection of cornerbacks they have here, but based on what you know about Wink Martindale's system from Baltimore, is it as big of a deal if he doesn't have the guys on the back end, and as long as the guys on the front end are pushing forward? Or is it, a partnership, or is it, the success of the front end rely on the back end? It's kind of like a chicken or the egg type of scenario, if you know what I mean. So in this defense, what do you think is the priority?
Defensive line, without a doubt. They need to get that pressure. And first you look at the defensive line, and that's what the secondary looks at. Even James Bradberry said himself, one of the reasons why, he had a bunch of teams to choose from, unfortunately, for Giants fans, he did choose the Eagles, but he said in one of those quotes that he liked the defensive line. And a lot of cornerbacks talk about their defensive lines. I think that helps them more than we all realize. That pressure allows them to play either off a little bit, or they can take chances and play on a little bit and kind of press them a little bit more. And so they have the opportunity to make up for any mistakes or false steps that they make if the pressure is there. So I think Thibodeau was A+ pick. I think him putting a lot of pressure with Leonard Williams. I think those two, man, it's going to be exciting to watch them. I think they're more important than the secondary.
Yeah, and throw in Azeez Ojulari from last year. He was the sack leader. He had 8 sacks as a rookie. It's going to be a pick your poison type of thing. And the good thing I would think is now that the defensive secondary doesn't have to hold its coverage as long. I mean, is that, do you agree with that?
Yeah, 1,000%. You guys also got Shaheed Ward,
yes,
who was on Baltimore,
right?
And then he went to Jacksonville, and now he's on the Giants. He's a force too, man. He's a big body. He gets penetration. So yeah, what you said, absolutely. They don't have to hold their hold on to their guys as long as they have to. If the defensive line gets that pressure, that secondary is not that you want them to make mistakes. Nobody wants them to make mistakes, but they're less liable if they do. Because you have such a force on the defensive line.
And the other thing to remember is that defensive secondary now is still kind of young. Adoree Jackson is the oldest guy on that team, and he's what, 5 years in now. So now that gives that defensive secondary a chance to kind of gel and get their footing underneath them to where, maybe by mid-season, now you've got a force up front and in the back end of the defense, which you didn't have for quite some time, not since the days of Jason Pierre-Paul with this Giants team. So, I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. But who I really like, I like your pick in Cordell Flott, the cornerback there. I think he played really well in college, and I think he's kind of a little bit underrated. To be honest. So, I think he's a guy that will be able to kind of come in and he's not undersized. He has the height where he can come in, learn, and I think he'll probably end up being one of the starters in the future.
Yeah, down the line for sure. I mean, especially with Adoree Jackson as that contract gets, more expensive and more expensive. But, interesting pick. Cordell Flott, a guy who I think is going to be more in the sub packages to start, and then maybe they'll look to work him into, some of the other, main packages. I mean, the slot cornerback position, I'm still not sure what the Giants are going to do there, and that's such an important position. That's basically like another starter now. So
yeah, it is.
So, do they go with Darnay Holmes? Do they go with Flott? Do they put a safety in there? It's like, what do you do? Or do you do a committee?
Yeah. I mean, it depends, like who's playing better, like your safety or your nickel corner. Because honestly, if you're running the nickel package, you can substitute them in and out. If your nickel's playing better, you're more likely to play man. I really thought that they were gonna go after Derek Stingley. I had them drafting him because he was perfect for their man defense. It was just like, that's who I thought that they were gonna get.
And he didn't last.
Yeah, no, he didn't. So it kind of sucks, man. I had him going to the Giants, but they're definitely playing more of a man defense this year. So I think whoever can kind of stick with those. Sticking deep man coverage a little bit better, that's who you're going to be your best bet going with. So anybody that's not, undersized, anything like that, but nickel corner, with that against that slot, seems like the slot is now like the norm. So it's more likely that a nickel corner is going to be, the starter rather than the 2 safeties. It seems like 3 corners are a necessity now, instead of those 2 safeties. So I think Flott is just, he was the perfect pick there. So I just think, he'll have time to learn. And he should be that guy, in the next year.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, there's only one place to find what you need quickly for your car or truck, and that's at rockauto.com. Rock Auto has over 20 years of offering competitive pricing on thousands of parts for every make, model, and manufacturer. Check out their website today, and don't forget to write down Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car or truck will ever need. rockauto.com. Now, one of the other things I've noticed about what we've seen from the Wings defense so far, a lot of amoeba looks. And when the amoeba takes shape, finally, you see some really funky looking formations. Like we saw two down linemen and then, two standing up and just different alignments that we haven't seen, but a lot more amoeba looks. And you're obviously familiar with amoeba. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, basically guys just milling around the line of scrimmage or in the box there, and then you don't know who's dropping back, who's coming at you, who's gonna flare out to the flats and stuff like that. Can you talk about the benefits of that, and then just the orchestration that's involved there, because that does take some orchestration for everybody to know what they have to do, when they have to do it, and to do it boom at the same time, so to speak.
Yeah, it's kind of like the counter to pre-snap motions on offense. But the downside of that is just what you just said. If as a defender, you're not really sure what you're doing, you can look at the guy next to you and know that he's in man, or this is his responsibility because he's standing there. But in the amoeba, it's like everybody's kind of standing around. So like if everybody isn't on the same page, it can also hurt you. But I think it's definitely the way to go in terms of like who the Giants have, like their personnel wise on defense. I think they have those guys that they're able to drop back at any moment. But they're also you have your two outside guys that can rush. So I think when you run the 3-4 defense, it's more of that like switching and hybrid, and that's why I think the 3-4 is definitely some more of like what we're going to see in the future. Less it's kind of moving away from the 4-3. But no, it's I think it's cool. It's definitely the pre-snap motion deceptive side of the defensive side of the ball. It's just the same thing, but on defense. I'm kind of excited to see that, and I think that amoeba look works well with that 3-4, because guys that have their their hands in the dirt, some of those guys in 3-4 on the edges, they don't like to put their hand in the dirt anyway. They would rather just rush off of a 2-point stance. So I think that just is an additional benefit to help them get a jump on the snap. So yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly, like I said, some really funky looking formations that come out. But let me ask you this: Don Martindale, known for throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at quarterbacks. That can come back to bite you sometimes, because guys can get the ball out of their hands quickly. Sometimes if a guy overshoots, it's like there's a gap there. And now if you're running an RPO, he can scoot through with a running play. So how do you think the Giants and Don Martindale would have to kind of balance it? Because you want to be aggressive, you want to get after the quarterback, but you also don't want to expose yourself to these gaps or having the ball come out of his hand quickly. Now you got nobody in the back end to defend it. So how do you kind of mitigate that?
Yeah, I think in terms of what you have to do on the outside is play off coverage. Because if your guys on the outside get beat and you're throwing the kitchen sink at them, it's toast. But at least if you can play off coverage, you give your quarterbacks a little bit of room, less time to kind of close that cushion between them and the wide receivers, so that if somehow quarterback did roll out of the pocket or something, being off coverage, as a corner or, as a safety, as a nickel, you're kind of able to have, one eye on the wide receiver and one eye on the quarterback. I know it seems like it's impossible. But that's what they tell you to do as a corner. You have to have one eye here, one eye in the backfield at all times. And you're definitely able to do that in off coverage a little bit better. So you don't have to worry about kind of getting beat over the top. And I think it kind of covers your butt when blitzes maybe don't land like you expect them to. So just as long as they pay a little more off coverage and they don't, press man, it won't seem like they're running cover zero and they're getting beat, so you just, if you overcompensate on one side, then you or I don't know what word that
neutralize,
would be, opposite. Yeah, on the other side. So you do one thing one way, just to kind of keep that balance,
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a tough thing to do, but I'm sure they'll figure it out. So, all right, one more question for you, and then I'll let you go. you look at this Giant team and what you know of it, okay, what still concerns you most about this roster or maybe the coaching staff, or what element still kind of makes you say, I hope they can kind of work it out?
Just the injuries, honestly.
Mm,
I would say on the offensive side of the ball, that those pieces are there. It's deadly, man. Like I had the Giants. I remember I was on a podcast with an Eagles podcaster, and he asked me, who I thought was going to win the conference, and he got so mad at me when I said the Giants because on paper, man, it's just like it's dominance.
yeah.
That team just has all the weapons for success. And injuries just really hindered them. So I think just as long as they're on the same page with the playbook, um, I think that that they have a chance to do everything possible to score a lot of points on the offensive side of the ball. So besides the injuries, though, because that's kind of inevitable,
Yeah.
just as long as they can stay healthy. But besides that, I would say the offensive line. That's still a little shaky in my eyes. I really like the Evan Neal pick, but that part of the team really like resonates throughout the entire team. If they can hold their blocks, then Daniel Jones has time. If he has time, then he can throw good balls to the wide receivers. If the wide receivers see that he has time and they're going through, they're making their breaks at the right time, then they're able to get their hands on the ball. So it's like it's a chain reaction. So I think it all starts with the offensive line. Evan Neal is definitely a step in the right direction, though.
And Giant fans will certainly agree with you on that because they haven't had a good offensive line. And gosh, you'd have to go back to maybe 2011, 2012. So it's been a while. It's been, you can make the argument, it's been a decade since they've had a consistently good offensive line. And you mentioned injuries, which is another, big issue. Brian Dable coming down from Buffalo. I don't think Buffalo had half the injury issue that the Giants had. I don't know if they were doing something different. I mean, is there a different way to train or something to avoid it? Or, I mean, I know broken bones, you can't avoid it because the game is violent, but, a lot of hamstrings, a lot of calves last year, a lot of soft tissue injuries. What can they do differently?
That's all mental, to be
Really?
honest. Yeah, like
Okay.
if you see a team that's losing, what
Uh-huh.
comes with losing is injuries.
Hmm.
But losing comes first. And then the injury, I can't make it out there today. Sorry, coach, because we're in their head, they're going to lose anyway. So it's like, why go, that really is a thing. And I know, people think all these players get paid a ton of money. No, I mean, like, well, yeah, they do, but they're not going to risk themselves if they don't feel comfortable in the coaching staff, in the blocking, in the quarterback, in whatever. And it's all about buying in and being there mentally. If they're able to do that, generally if one guy gets hurt and kind of blows everything, like with Kadarius Toney, that was kind of just a weird thing. I think that kind of put a damper on everything. Maybe that was the first domino to fall, and then the rest of them were kind of like, I'm not going to say that happens every time, but most of the time it's a mental thing where the injuries kind of come in, where it's one after another, and then you look at the record and they're losing. So just as long as they buy in and it's a mental thing, I think the injuries won't come to the forefront as much, and maybe guys will play through that's generally how it works. So
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm excited to kind of see them take a step in the right direction, and I think we'll see less injuries if that happens.
Yeah. They avoid the old, what they call the business decision, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what they call it, but yeah, I mean, right now, optimism is abound in East Rutherford that, it's a new era, a lot of positive. I mean, you can even feel a different vibe in the building. People aren't walking on eggshells. People are more relaxed. This coaching staff seems committed to wanting to get to know these players, not only what makes them tick as people, which is important. Oh, that's an overlooked thing, by the way, but also what do they do well? What don't they do well? And it's just, it just sounds like it's become such a psychological thing because, you're investing in your your players the way that they're investing in your program. So it kind of goes both ways, I think. Something that maybe you didn't see maybe, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So fingers crossed that it yields some good stuff, because I'm tired of covering bad football. I've been there for the highs and the lows. I've been there for the 2 Super Bowls in the Eli Manning era, and of course the last decade, which was, not fun. But anyway, I think they're on the right track. I'm always optimistic. You got to be, right? So
yeah, you have to be.
Laurie, I really appreciate your expertise. I appreciate your time today. Again, folks, you can find her on Twitter. You can see her Twitter account. I'm going to put in the show notes all, a little bio, a link to her YouTube channel, a link to some of her articles over on USA Today's Touchdown Wire. Do check out her work, and I'm sure you've got some great stuff coming up. So, Laurie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was fun, and hopefully we get to chat again down the line.
Yeah, hope so. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everybody. Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. Don't forget, tomorrow we will have an OTA report. The Giants have an OTA on Thursday, today, when this show is airing. So we'll have some observations, some thoughts and whatnot from that OTA on Friday's show. So until then, for Laurie Fitzpatrick, I'm Patricia Traina. Thank you for making the LockedOn Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll catch you tomorrow.